Debate, the honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important not to let this debate on an amendment that has to do with harassment and whether or not RCMP members will be allowed to bring issues of harassment to the bargaining table to get derailed by questions of process on certification. There'll be time for that in the debate. There's already been a lot of discussion around that. There's going to be more opportunity for discussion on that at third reading. And I would say, because what I haven't heard in the arguments of some members is why a different rule should apply to RCMP members than a rule that will be applying to other Canadian workers who are federally regulated. The place for that debate is on C4, which will be coming back to this House as well. So I just want to take some time to talk about however RCMP members get there, if they get there, to have a certified bargaining agent. The question that we're talking about now with respect to this amendment is what that bargaining agent is going to be able to bring up at the bargaining table. So that's the important issue, I think, with respect to debate on this amendment. And I'm pleased to rise in support of this amendment. Members who have been following this debate closely will know that I argued with the support of my caucus at committee for an even greater lessening of restrictions on collective bargaining because we think that that's required, frankly, Mr. Speaker, in order to honor the spirit of the Supreme Court decision that was taken. And so that ruling, and we heard quotes from that ruling from the honourable parliamentary secretary earlier. It says very clearly that part of the impetus and reason for the kind of freedom of association that's guaranteed as a charter right and thereby also guarantees collective bargaining is that workers have to be able to have a meaningful recourse within their workplace and a way to identify their own priorities, to bring them to the employer, and to have a shot, I guess is the really informal way of putting it, at having some success. So if we're going to bring a bill forward that says, for all the many reasons that RCMP members sustained a protracted court battle in order to get collective bargaining, those have to do with workplace safety and health. They have to do with the topic of this amendment, which is harassment and conduct within the workplace. If we're going to bring forward a bill in response to that decision that says, okay, fine, you've got collective bargaining on paper, but you can't bring any of those issues to the table, and we don't even care what your proposals would be. We don't care how reasonable they would be. Before we know even what they are, we're going to rule them out of court through this legislation, Mr. Speaker. I think does a real disservice to the Supreme Court's ruling. I think it does a disservice to members, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's a reason why, if we don't relax these exemptions, we're going to see in very short order another court battle. And I think eventually, if the Supreme Court continues to rule in the spirit that it has been on collective bargaining, we're going to see that this law doesn't pass muster. We have an opportunity now to be able to move forward with a bill that would actually give RCMP members what they asked for and what they fought for going through the court process. I still think there's going to be a lot of problems with the bill because there are so many other exclusions, Mr. Speaker, but we'll support this amendment because it's a way of taking a bad bill and making it a little bit better. And it's a bad bill that has a strong likelihood of passing because the government seems quite committed to passing it in its present form. Why they feel such a loyalty to this form, Mr. Speaker, is beyond me. This is actually the language that was pulled out of a previous Conservative bill. They haven't minced words when it comes to criticizing the previous government in terms of its approach and thinking. Well, the Liberals certainly have not held back criticism of the previous government when it comes to their approach to labour relations, and yet the first bill that they're likely to pass, Mr. Speaker, doesn't just adopt that same philosophy and approach. It's actually, for the most part, word for word, the very same bill that had been contemplated by the previous government going back as far as 2010, Mr. Speaker. So this amendment is a way, I think, of trying to bring the bill a little bit closer to the spirit of the Supreme Court decision. I don't think it gets us there, but I think it's important for RCMP members, if there is a possibility of passing this amendment, and I hope there is, that will at least make things a little better for them. And I would argue, Mr. Speaker, and have been arguing at length and throughout this entire process, that it's not just an opportunity for RCMP members. It's an opportunity for the institution as well, Mr. Speaker, because we've heard and we hear today from the government about how they're engaging to work on the issue of harassment and to improve it, and they're going to study it, Mr. Speaker, as if it hadn't been studied before, and then they're going to make some changes, and I wish them well in that. And I'm not saying that that isn't important. I'm not saying that that's not an important part of the process. But what we have here with the Supreme Court decision and now Bill C-7, if it's changed, is an opportunity to bring in a genuinely new approach, to do something genuinely different, and to allow RCMP members to bring their knowledge and expertise of the force and how things work on the ground directly into conversations with management. For instance, Mr. Speaker, if it's the case that Parliament is going to be addressing workplace issues in the RCMP along with management, and it's going to take parliamentarians going around studying issues and then a law coming before Parliament and passing through the two houses in order to address workplace issues, is it the view of the government that somehow that's a better process and that it's somehow more responsive than a process that would allow a union representing RCMP members made up of the very people who are out there doing that good work on behalf of Canadians? The time that it takes for an issue to filter up through an organization, get media attention, build public pressure for government to act on it, and it is unfortunate that with issues of sexual harassment in the RCMP we've reached that point, because it means that it's gotten very bad, Mr. Speaker, but there's all sorts of other workplace issues that maybe don't get quite that bad, but are egregious nevertheless, and could be addressed by a process that actually consults the people who are doing the work on a day-to-day basis. And you could get that kind of day-to-day or month-to-month feedback between the people doing the job and the people managing them. The model that says somehow issues have to get bad enough that they come to Parliament, and then we go out and we study the issue sometimes for years, and then bring legislative changements, and that's how we're going to address issues in the RCMP. I don't think you have to be a super kind of business ideologue to say that this is just a bad model. It's just not efficient. Why wouldn't you want a model, if you're seriously trying to address an issue, that allows you to get more frequent feedback and doesn't involve a bunch of third-party players like parliamentarians, for instance, who don't have that day-to-day experience and don't have a real operating knowledge? It may be that some members of Parliament do, but if they do, it's a coincidence of the fact that it's that particular type of person that got elected to represent that particular riding. But I think it's fair to say that most of us in this chamber don't have that kind of day-to-day experience, and it just seems wrong-headed to me to pretend that the most serious issues of the force are going to have to come here before they can be dealt with. There's an opportunity here to have a better system, to have a system that RCMP members appreciate much more fully, that they're actually a part of, and that if it works well, Mr. Speaker, and this is part of our point, is just that we should not prejudge the issue of whether this is going to work well or not. If it works well, it means that less of those issues are going to come to this House. And I would say that by the time issues get here, they've gotten really bad, Mr. Speaker, and it's and they're probably far away from being effectively solved. So a good collective bargaining process can help us catch more of those issues early on, resolve them in the workplace so that they don't have to come to Parliament to get fixed. To the extent that this amendment, in a limited way, creates more opportunity for that kind of better process in respect of a certain issue, we're in favor of it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.